So goals for the next 30 minutes or so, again, get an agency perspective overall. We'd love to understand a little bit about where we're at in this evolution, the hype cycle, and what's real, what's not. We heard some great feedback from clients themselves directly. And to start, maybe just a high-level overview, current role, and what you're focused on.
Well, obviously the agency structure is something that most of you are familiar with. We're all operating, as you've heard in the previous panel, particularly across media. We have to look at response, we have to consider brand equity, we have to consider what the client will buy, and I do put it that way. We can all be very excited about a lot of the opportunities that this new approach to inventory offers, but at the same time, if we can't communicate that to the advertisers in a way that's compelling to prompt them to test it and then deliver it in a way that actually shows return, then actually instead of moving forward, we're going backwards. And I think that's one of the big problems that we all face. Joe talked about friction. There's an awful lot of friction in this space. Some of it is system friction, some of it is knowledge friction, and actually one of the biggest friction points is overselling. Those of us that are evangelical about how this type of approach can change, not just buying, but actually I believe the whole approach to planning and particularly segmentation and market sizing, we're desperate for advertisers to understand why this is so important rather than simply a way of consolidating ad network buys and getting cheaper CPAs. So where are we? We're trying to manage a lot of things that are about execution and about repositioning of this industry all at the same time.
So are things getting, again, at a high level, easier or more difficult in that regard? Or maybe both?
Well, obviously in such a private assembly with people not communicating out. Chatham House rules, I believe, is the phrase. I'm obviously going to be deeply honest about any of the difficulties you might be facing. I think the biggest problem that we're all facing to some degree is that clients are now beginning to buy this at scale and they therefore have expectations. So we're moving from a strategic sell about innovation and change to having to deliver against it. And we have a pool of people that know how to execute in this space that's very small and is being chased. If you think that it's difficult to get search people, finding the newly launched ATS profile in the marketplace is a significant challenge. So I think that we have to restate the point, we have to do a better job of explaining to the stakeholders, be they internal agency stakeholders, be they senior people on the publisher side that are listening to somebody telling them that the way of distributing inventory needs to change, and they have to engage with exchanges and RTB, and if they're coming from a brand background, they may not believe that because they're not seeing the yield structure to reflect that. We've got to keep managing the expectations, but ensuring that we're learning. Again, as I think was said earlier, the enemy of good is perfect. So we've got to manage the expectations, but keep it moving forward.
Is there a challenge, and as we talked for preparing for this, in making it too simple and having it appear to be something that they could potentially do themselves as your clients?
Yeah, again, Richard was talking about the need to make things simple because Facebook is absorbing an awful lot of money with a less tangibly attractive advertising platform than, say, Devil. That is accepting the old paradigm of a reel of a product shot with people presenting it in a way that's aspirational. But even so, it's a fair point. But at the same time, if we oversimplify the explanation of what we're trying to achieve, which we often do to try and convince people to move forward in whichever part of the stakeholder ecosystem, we can actually leave them with the impression that it is simple. And those of you in the room that are close to this know it's absolutely far from simple. So that has two main outcomes, neither of which is good for the agency. One is the client decides to do it in-house, which, as we all know, has happened in a number of instances on the search side of things. And And again, some of the attribution discussions about search earlier illuminated that even though search is arguably between 40 and 60% of spend, and it's been around for more than 10 years, and is still fairly misunderstood because people are optimizing to the last click rather than understanding even the keyword funnel, let alone the natural, etc. So it isn't simple, but people are taking in-house because either the agency isn't serving it in a sufficiently sophisticated fashion, or they believe it's simple. The other side is that the expectations aren't delivered against. So oversimplifying in this space, I think, is a mistake, but communicating in a more coherent fashion that isn't laden with jargon is something we have to do. We have to tell a story. We talk about something called experience optimization. That's the latest way that we're trying to convey to our clients that incorporating user-level data sets, matching across user-level data sets, and using that to build segments that are either tailoring the creative messaging or tailoring the experience when they're in an environment that's owned, or even potentially segmenting CRM-type tactics, incorporating social as well. It's about using that information to determine how best to motivate that individual to do something you want them to do, which is consider your brand in one way, respond to it in another way, or buy it in another fashion. So the experience optimization is the way that we're trying to tie all of that versioning of experience, targeting of audience, and management of a customer journey or an old style funnel into a package of different technologies and platforms that will allow you to do that in a more end-to-end fashion. So it's not throwing the acronyms, it's not talking about why Tumri is not as good as TerraSend or et cetera, why Google Analytics 2 is going to be better than Google Analytics 1. That's really boring. It's really important, but it's really boring in the environment of trying to bring people across the bridge to understand why this is something that merits serious attention.